A dissertation on contract variations in the construction industry, a discursive study in dispute resolution with regard to contract variations, by Anthony G. Slowey. Simon Lofthouse, who is widely recognised as a leading domestic and international lawyer with particular expertise in construction, energy and natural resources and professional negligence, presented a paper to the meetings of the Society of Construction Law in 2011, in which he stated that in a perfect world, contracts would be clear and readily comprehensible. They would not lead to disputes, and third-party assistance would not be needed to determine disputes. This observation is not intended as a criticism, since variations are now inevitable in the modern construction industry. This paper addresses the separate but linked issues of variations of contract and their involvement in construction disputes, while all the while discussing the appropriateness of dispute resolution methods with regards to this. To illustrate this, consideration will be taken of the International Federation of Consultant Engineers' Conditions of Contract for Construction for Building and Engineering Works, more commonly known as the Red Book, as this is historically derived from the Institute of Civil Engineering Reforms, which is founded under common law. Consideration will also be taken in the form of the Joint Contracts Tribunal intermediate form of contracts, as will give a sufficient scope to contract provisions that might apply to the majority of construction projects. The overall hypothesis of this paper is that contract variations are a major cause of construction disputes. This statement must be solely referred to as a provisional idea, as its merits requires evaluation, which is the intended outcome of this paper. Other outcomes include to identify the need for dispute resolution with regard to contract variations, to outline the different contractual requirements regarding variation, disputes, and dispute resolution, to discuss the most successful method of dispute resolution with regards to variations to contract, to look at case studies regarding construction disputes with regards to contract variations, to make recommendations regarding dispute resolution and variations to construction contracts. While these outcomes are important to the overall nature of this dissertation, they must be constantly interlinked with the stated hypothesis. For proper evaluation of the stated hypothesis, one must define the specifics in operational terms. Therefore, a derivation must be made for both a variation and a dispute, with reference to their meaning, cause, and contractual requirements. This will hence give a more fitting understanding when it comes to discussing the appropriateness of the inevitable dispute resolution. When planning a systematic approach to evaluate the hypothesis in the most clear way possible, I begin with defining what exactly classifies a dispute and a variation. With regards to variations, I studied their contractual definitions, while neither were comprehensive together to give a distinct understanding. In relation to disputes, I studied journals predominantly linked to construction disputes. This led me to look into the causes and their contractual requirements of variations and disputes, as the root of the problem is imperative when discussing dispute resolution. I decided I would begin to identify what exactly classifies as a variation. With reference to the potential effects of variation orders on institutional building projects by Aaron and Peng, I was able to subsequently determine two types of variations. Beneficial variations, which will generally improve the quality standard, reduce cost, schedule, or the degree of difficulty in a project, and detrimental variations, which will generally negatively impact the client's value or the project performance. A variation is regarded as a simple concept which hides a plethora of potential difficulties, and it is difficult to derive a meaning of it without going into their contractual definitions, which I will approach later in this presentation. As I already stated, the understanding of the causes of variations is imperative when it comes to dispute resolution. In relation to the causes of delay, deviation in design constructions by Bharati et al., I was able to identify that variations were caused by design, construction, fabrication, transportation, or operability, with the design variations constituting to 52.5% of the total variations, which fell into three categories: design changes caused by improvements through design processes, design changes that originate from the client, and lastly, design changes that originate by an engineer or consultant familiar with the process. Aaron and Peng went on to further identify the four origin agents: client-related changes, which can include replacement of materials, the client's financial difficulties; consultant-related changes, such as error and omissions in design; contractor-related changes, such as the unavailability of equipment; and other changes, such as the weather. As I already stated, For the purpose of this paper, I have taken consideration to the JCT contract and the FIDIC Red Book when it comes to discussing how contracts deal with variations. While neither is comprehensive, the JCT contract is more limited in the circumstances it addresses than that in the Red Book. Simon Lofthouse stated in his paper presented at the meetings of the Society of Construction Law in 2010 that neither variation clauses in the contracts allow the employer to vary the works fundamentally. This can be better described as a change from building a bridge over a river to building a tunnel under the river. Such a change is theoretically permitted on one reading of the variation clauses, while under common law, from which both the FIDIC and JCT forms are both derived, such a fundamental change would not be recognised as a change in scope, properly falling within the true nature of a variation. Also, JCT contract does not differentiate between permanent and temporary works, while the Red Book does, with reference to clause 1.1.5.8, which states that works means the permanent works and the temporary works, or either of them as appropriate. When it comes to defining construction disputes, one must firstly understand that the key clearly lies with people interacting in some way, and secondly one must distinguish between conflict and dispute, as these words are often interchanged in common parlance. Peter Fenn et al. Noted in 1997 in a journal titled Conflict and Dispute in Construction that conflict can be managed while disputes require resolution and so are associated with the distinct justiciable issues. Therefore, a construction dispute can be defined as a consequential deviation of a construction conflict degenerating to a state of altercation. When studying the causes of construction disputes, it is important to again look at the interaction of people, as many are based upon arguments about technical or legal points, which can escalate to the point where people become intransigent. In Construction Contracts Law and Management by John Murdoch and Will Hughes, it states that in order to identify the root of contractual disputes, it is essential to examine the parties in terms of the amount of time and money available, project environmental factors, and the magnitude of the issue, and so on. Research taken by leading global asset consultant E.C. Harris for the year 2012 divulged that 46.3% of dispute teams believed that the actions of the project manager and engineer were very often at the heart of the problem. These problems went on to become a marked influence in the dispute. The report released by E.C. Harris stated that the most common problem relating to the project manager or engineer were being too partial to the employer's interests, a lack of understanding of the procedural aspects of the contract, a lack of authority that is limited by levels of authority issued by the employer, such as not being allowed to issue variation orders over a certain value. When looking at how contracts deal with construction disputes, I again referred to Construction Contracts Law and Management by John Murdoch and Will Hughes. They state that the first factor that defines the nature of a construction dispute is the terms of a contract. This is significant if there is a difference in interpretation. If it is not a standard form contract, or if it is an organization's own standard form contract, then the principle of contract proferentum will prevail. This means that any ambiguity in the contract will be constructed against the party who seeks to benefit by exclusions or limitations in it. This is usually the party that will put it forward. For my plan of completion, I will first discuss dispute resolution. I will again refer to the Construction Contracts Law and Management by John Murdoch and Will Hughes to study adversarial and non-adversarial dispute resolution. I will also examine the journal by Kathleen M.J. Harmon titled Resolution of Construction Disputes, a review of current methodologies, as well as continuing my research with reference to related journals. Among the subheadings I plan to discuss are methods of dispute resolution, appropriateness of dispute resolution methods, and contractual requirements of dispute resolution. I plan to have this completed by the 29th of November 2013. I then intend to examine dispute resolution with regards to contracts. Although I do not have any subheadings relating to this matter at the moment, I believe through extensive research I will be able to derive such headings along with appropriate references. I also aim to have this completed by the 24th of January 2014. Following this, I will consider relating case studies, such as the Channel Tunnel Group versus Balfour Beatty Construction Limited. This case illustrates the dissertation hypothesis, as the parties were unable to reach an agreement regarding the price of a variation and thus degenerated into a dispute which required legal actions. I plan to research more relatable case studies, which I hope I will be able to complete by 14th of February 2014. Lastly, I will conclude the dissertation by firstly discussing points set out throughout the paper, and secondly by referring back to my hypothesis and outcomes to see if I sufficiently achieved them while making appropriate recommendations. I hope to complete this by the 28th of February 2014, along with the abstract, list of tables and figures and appendices. That concludes my interim presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and thank you for listening.